queerness in preschools, gender diverse Army Captain, and CNN Neopronoun guidelines. This ain't your mama's podcast, the Chico de Manuel Show. Let's get it. A wise man once told me, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and the weak lie down by the wayside. I must have been 13 years old when I first heard that. A man named Paul Grooms. He was a staff member in the boys' home I was in. At the time, I lacked the depth to fully embrace the meaning of that phrase. However, today, it's on a constant loop in my mind. It didn't take long for the going to get tough. For a large portion of my life, I was shielded from some consequences I believe, in hindsight, I needed to have suffered. I was blessed with a guardian angel of a grandmother who never fell short on that role. At a certain point, after looking in the mirror of myself and being filled with shame and guilt for taking such egregious advantage of my grandmother, I understood that I had no skill at navigating myself through life's tribulations. I was weak, mentally and physically. I had no idea what it was like to struggle for real. To have nobody to call when I did something utterly stupid that I knew I shouldn't have. Be completely and solely responsible for all of my actions, all of the time. I left my grandmother to venture out into the world and seek the struggle that I desperately lacked. I hope to find whatever I was missing in my life and to take enough action so that one day in the future I could look at myself in the mirror and be genuinely proud of the person that I had become. After my grandmother's passing in a series of sudden and devastating events, I found myself in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I took a trip for my birthday, and 2 weeks later, I was a Nevadan. Kind of. Vegas was bright and novel to me. The never-ending access to gambling of all forms was right up my alley. Not to mention the smoother pipeline to all the drugs and vices I wanted. Blew about $30K, ended up homeless about 3 times, lost a job at Wynn Las Vegas and many others. Learned how to actually be homeless and survive by any means. Dated a trans woman. I made a little something for myself, and I let it all slip out of my grasp right before my eyes. As of now, I feel like I've lived 2 lives. Why do I share all of this? Because there's an immense amount of pain, self-doubt, and personal disgrace that only a person capable of feeling ashamed can even begin to process and understand. I grew very philosophical and emotionally intelligent. I began to lightly study Stoicism, and whilst my end circumstances didn't always pan out, I never lost faith for the first time in my life. I had no room to. After years and years of lying down by the wayside, I finally decided it was time to get going. Spending all that time amongst these people was like a view into the future, and I saw where I was going to end up. I didn't want that. I decided to get going. That energy is what fuels me to do this podcast. My outlook that all my failures had purpose if they got me where I'm supposed to be. I'm never going to stop trying to make a better way for myself. My views have changed so drastically with little new information. I found the guidance I lacked in good role models, and now understand on a deeply fundamental level why I had to get going. I had to get going towards my destiny. Running from it has taken me all across the country. I've seen so much, and I've been so fortunate amongst all of my ignorance that there is no way that there couldn't be somebody watching over me. There must be some kind of divinity with my name on it, but it isn't going to show up at my doorstep. I have to fight every day, the best man possible in every circumstance. Some days I win, some days I'll be bested. And maybe it doesn't play out how I want to. That's just life. I only have control over myself, and now that I know that, without any doubt, I must use my gift of understanding to pass on this knowledge to others that are struggling to find their path less traveled. Time to finally get going on the path to leadership. I'm too eloquently gifted and intelligent beyond my years to not be a force for good, especially with all the evil I now see before me. It's like a higher power flipped a switch, and in that moment, the unwinding began and the path was crystal clear. I don't worry myself with invasive thoughts and anxiety and depression. I focus on forward movement and keeping my mind and body strong and practicing gratitude for how lucky I am to be Chico de Manuel. So if you're feeling weak, sluggish, and get going, just remember that we all have a call to action that will grant us purpose and meaning in our lives. And we all have a responsibility to bring it to fruition. Which means you've got to get your ass up, stop making excuses, and start showing results. Get going. Now, when I see the weak lying down by the wayside, decline my extended hand, I'll leave them there. How dare I deny someone of their struggle when I see what finding my struggle has done for me. Get fucking going. That's Monday motivation for you. Just about all of us could understand the simplicity and novelty of a preschooler's daily life. As small children, everything is still fresh. Rainbows, butterflies, and smiles from all creatures in all directions. Preschoolers are tasked with learning the alphabet, colors, identifying animals, reading short stories, etc. However, one thing I'm struggling to remember as I shuffle through the memories of my early childhood is any mention of queerness or sexuality to any degree. I can't readily recall any mention of gender theory, queerness, gender identity in any curriculum of any educational epoch of my life. So why are we discussing that with children now? Why weren't we doing it ever before? You might say the answer to that question is self-evident. Topics like gender ideology and sexual orientation are inherently inappropriate topics for minors, and because of the psychological effects that accompany. Yet still, there are school districts that do just this. There are countless TikTok videos from teachers who openly talk about their gender and sexuality with small children. They attempt to conceal curriculums when parents request them, sometimes leading parents to sue school districts in order to find out what their children are being taught. They also inform faculty and students about upcoming gender transitions and gender reveals, and do not always inform the parents that shit like this is going on. I found an article courtesy of Wealthy Living titled "Queerness Should Be Taught in Preschool. Not teaching sexuality is seen as a very white middle class thing to do." Before I read it, I want to comment on the part that sees teaching children about queerness, sexuality, and other inappropriate shit as a very white middle class thing to do. It's an extremely bizarre thing to headline an article with, and even more bizarre to believe and implement this garbage. First of all, I'm curious if this counts as anti-white or racist. I certainly wouldn't take it as a compliment if I were white. I don't understand how not teaching young children about sex, homosexuality, and confusing gender ideology is white or middle class. What the fuck does that even mean? I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've ever heard something described as middle class. And when I did, it had nothing to do with teaching youngsters about sex and feeding them outright lies about gender. To headline an article with something so frighteningly absurd immediately indicates a leftist bias before I even read one filthy sentence. And I can be pretty sure that whatever follows is objectively repulsive and offensive to any responsible adult with a half functioning brain stem. Sadly, I'm going to endure the visceral torture and read this horseshit to display the kind of culture that's being fostered amongst our youth today. It says here, one second, gotta step back here. It's a lot to unpack, and I want to make sure I do this in an appropriate order. Here we go. A preschool teacher in California was slammed after challenging the notion of childhood innocence and advocating for discussing typically sensitive topics with young children. William Willie Villapando, the center of this controversy, has argued that certain subjects considered inappropriate, including queerness and gender identity, can be appropriately introduced to pre-kindergarten age children. Villapando, an educator associated with Trapp Preschool in the Rialto Unified School District, says that the concept of childhood innocence is a myth that does not align with the reality of the children's experiences. In a society where information is easily accessible and children are exposed to diverse perspectives, he argues that shielding them from certain topics may not be as effective as fostering open dialogues that address their natural curiosity. There is a common mythology that children live in this world of pure innocence, and that introducing or exposing them to real-world adults is somehow shattering this illusion for them. Therefore, this is a banning of topics and issues that children should not be exposed to, as if they're not experiencing them already. Central to Villapando's beliefs is his advocacy for introducing discussions about gender and sexuality to preschool children. Children experience gender and race every day. They need and deserve to see themselves to feel seen, and them to see others not like them. Villapando emphasized that children should see themselves in the classroom, and educators have a responsibility to ensure that children's identities and experiences are acknowledged. He argued that the idea of children not being exposed to sexuality is a view that is very white, Christian, upper class, cisgendered, and heterocentric. However, his viewpoints have stirred up some considerable controversy. Critics slammed him, saying that exposing young children to topics like queerness and sexuality could potentially lead to confusion or premature awareness of concepts beyond their developmental understanding. Opponents argue that his approach disregards the importance of preserving the innocence of childhood and that sensitive topics should be addressed at an age-appropriate stage. Critics say that while children may naturally encounter these topics, it is the role of caregivers and parents to guide them through understanding in a way that aligns with their family values. Several social media users expressed their thoughts on the incident. One Twitter user wrote, "Spoken as one who probably had their innocence taken from them as a child, I weep for these people and the cycle of abuse they perpetuate." Another user wrote, "Whole intentions are suspect with this man. If he doesn't understand the age and appropriate nature of gender identity ideology with little kids, he should not be a preschool teacher, and all preschool teachers should be required to sign a written agreement to not expose kids." Now, what are the takeaways from that? How exactly can you appropriately introduce inappropriate information to children? I'd like to know how that works. Like, what kind of circular workaround, what inside knowledge do you have that we don't? And not only that, why is there suddenly a need to teach this to children when there never was before? As I aforementioned, there was none of this when I was in that level of school. There was no sexuality class. Sex ed might have been as close as you got. But there was no gender drag queen hour. None of that shit existed when I was a kid. So why does it suddenly exist now? And who determines how to appropriately teach young children about sexuality? Because I think we already had an appropriate manner, and now you guys are trying to change it to something else, and we're having problems that we didn't have before. And if this is all okay, why are school districts behaving cryptically regarding the material their children are taught? Why are schools keeping it a secret and announcing gender transitions to students? And if students come out and identify as one thing or another, the school doesn't have to tell them, or they weren't telling them, I should say. To get further into this, How can you speak in the reality of children's experience in relation to their innocence? Like to just say that children are already experiencing it, so up in the ante by a significant amount is okay also? I don't think that follows. Like just because they already experienced it, you still kind of want to stagger or not give it to them all at once. And how exactly is that mythical? What do you mean mythical? Mythical like the Loch Ness monster or Bigfoot? How is this a myth? This is not folklore. Like this is not. I don't. I've never heard that children's experiences are myths. Like we know what happens to children. We know what happens to children, and that's why things like these are issues that bother people who care about children. Because children by default have innocence. They haven't been alive enough, or they haven't been able to have a mind function at a level that would cause them to inevitably come across some of the sin associated with life. That's where their innocence is. Like when a kid does something, they don't do it with mens rea, like they're trying to be assholes or they're trying to be damaging. Like they're just doing what with the little information that they have. That's innocence. What this guy is doing is guilt. He's guilty of being a weirdo. And as an educator, why are you ironically worried about the innocence of children as it pertains to teaching them about queerness? Why aren't you worried about the innocence of children overall? Like to be protected from weirdos who engage in this weird form of child perversion like you do. This preschool is certainly a trap, that's for sure. Excuse me. And what information? Who's exposing children to diverse perspectives besides you guys? I mean, you guys are the ones that's trying to teach pre-kindergarten children about sexuality and that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. How does that not sound an alarm in your head? You're the diverse perspective, not reality. And fostering open dialogues is something that happens at a particular age. Just because decadence exists doesn't mean you need to shove it down children's throats, knowing that they'll have questions and using that as an end run to inculcate them with this insanity. And so what if it's not as effective? Is not as effective arguing its ineffectiveness? Or are you just saying our method doesn't work as much, but it works just as good as the other? Like, what exactly does that mean? It's not as effective. This is all language games that they try to play to sweep these agendas under the rug because most people are not analyzing the words that they use like I am. This is not a myth at all. In fact, I would challenge that nobody believes that children live in a world of innocence. The children are the innocent ones, not the children living in a world of innocence. The children themselves possess the innocence because they haven't really had a chance to have life take them for their respective ride. And also, this begs the question, what gives you the certainty that children are experiencing this already, so ripping off the Band-Aid is the best solution? I would argue that's the worst solution. To make such a decision based on the presumption that children are already experiencing sexuality and gender identity, that's speculation at best. Topics like sexuality are banned for children for a reason. Children will eventually encounter these facets of life. However, this does not imply that since such is true, it is beneficial to expose them to it at a young age instead of gradually easing these topics in as they grow. And how the hell do you experience gender and race? This guise of concern for the well-being of children is wildly contradictory. But like seriously though, how do you like? My life is not primarily a black experience, a black male experience. Like, what even is that? Like, that question always stands to exist when you say a black male. Like, what do you mean a black male experience? How am I experiencing gender and race? And how does that make you concerned for children by trying to confuse them with all this lexicon, all this jargon? They barely figuring out ABCs and 3-letter words, and you trying to drop this bomb on them. God damn it! It's a teacher's job to teach, and it's a teacher's job to teach, and a parent's job to culture. These are not your damn kids. You don't have the right to just teach them whatever the hell you want to. You've been entrusted with a duty. That's the only reason you have these kids. And because we can't always keep our kids with us when we're doing what we have to do to provide for our families. To me, all this shit sounds like covert pedophilia, and it's vile and disgusting. These people are unhinged maniacs, and they need to be stopped. And no matter how many people who have actually experienced this speak out against it, they will always ignore these anecdotes and continue pushing this cruel agenda onto children. Because that's what leftism is. That's a product of hedonism and always thinking about yourself in the current moment, and you don't see these as consequences that will affect everyone negatively. You're damn right. This is representative of the school system of modern America, and it's terrifying and abhorrent. And every time I hear a story about this, I just like my ability to cringe weakens because but my desire to do something about it strengthens. This shit is sickening. Ultimately, anyone with common sense is aware that the school system wants to indoctrinate your child and feed them to the fiery depths of leftism. They don't give a damn about the innocence or the sanctity of your children. These people are satanic and they hate themselves. Their worldview is fatally stricken with hedonistic undertones and narcissism. Any conservative value is labeled as white or middle class. Terms like diversity and equity and inclusion, ironically, are attacks against white people and the traditions that got us to where we are today. To be honest, it's increasingly frightening, seeing as how they almost got me on board with that bullshit when I was 28. Don't think it can't be you. You owe it to yourself and whatever community you're a part of to align with the objective truth, to say the things that need to be said that nobody wants to say for the sake of our futures. A civilization without culture and stability is doomed to fail, and we've got one foot out the door on this one. When you think of a military, what comes to your mind? Titles like Marine, Navy SEAL, Special Forces likely bring to mind hardened, battle-ready soldiers capable of neutralizing threats, infiltration, and espionage. Disciplined and trained for war, a malicious soldier's need to uphold a particular standard to be effective in its overall purpose, domestic security. The U.S. military is the most powerful and expansive military force in existence. However, militaries are falling victim to gender ideologues. U.S. military attendance is at an all-time low, and there are TikToks circulating about male soldiers who want to feel feminine and express their sexual proclivities within the confines of the military. Why might this be an issue? Well, if I had to guess, I would likely say the chief grievance concerning this idiocy is its irrelevance to the mission of the military and its prevalence as a major distraction and hindrance to the reputation of a militia. Personally, I don't want someone tasked with domestic safety from terrorism and other threats, worried about feeling feminine. I don't find the idea of a blue-haired, 135-pound twink who can't fire his rifle because he doesn't want to get gunpowder underneath his nails appealing to any degree. I wouldn't want to risk being pinned down or in a foxhole with a gender-confused crybaby who's more worried about gender identity instead of being a fucking killing machine. I guess that stance is too white and transphobic, huh? I couldn't give a shit. Jesse Noble is an Army captain who has led a movement to change uniform policy in the Australian Army so individuals can express their gender identity more freely. Don't get it twisted. Shit like this happens domestically because gender ideology and being seen is the most important virtue to these lunatics. I hope it doesn't take full control. Not too long ago, our military was donning pride flags to show where its priorities were. Such a sad moment indeed. To dip back into the wealthy living well, here's another article about the stunning and brave Jesse Noble and the movement to cripple the military from the inside out. One second, here we go. All right. Gender-diverse Army Captain Jesse Noble has spearheaded a movement to rewrite the Australian Army's uniform policy, enabling individuals to express their gender identity more freely. Captain Jesse Noble, a devoted churchgoer with a wife and children, came to the profound realization that they identified as gender diverse at the age of 35, describing it as a revelation akin to being struck by a truck. Holding this truth close, Jesse initially kept their identity concealed, intending to share it only with a select few in their lifetime. However, in February, Jesse took a courageous step forward and disclosed their true identity to their supervisor at Darwin's 1st Combat Signals Regiment. Integral to their journey of self discovery was the desire to don clothing that aligned with their identity, leading them to seek approval to wear the female uniform while serving in the Army. The Army, however, upheld a rigid uniform policy, which did not allow non binary and intersex individuals to choose between male and female uniforms. This policy dictated that male personnel keep their hair shorter than 4 centimeters and prohibited piercings, makeup, and nail polish. Undeterred, Jesse took the monumental step of submitting the necessary paperwork to request a female uniform, a pivotal moment in their quest for acceptance. Thankfully, Jesse's bravery bore fruit, as their immediate supervisor granted interim approval for the female uniform. The request gained traction within the hierarchy, culminating in the release of a new Army rule in April. This groundbreaking policy now permits gender fluid, non binary, and intersex personnel to choose either the male or the female uniform. While Jesse still dons camouflage attire for daily duties, excuse me, they deeply appreciate the newfound freedom to express themselves openly. I can wear makeup now. My ears are pierced at work. I have hair longer than most male presenting people do at work. My fingernails are painted. Jesse's journey towards self discovery and acceptance came with its share of challenges. Regrettably, their marriage could not withstand the changes brought about by this revelation, resulting in a divorce, and they also chose to depart from the Pentecostal church. Despite these obstacles, Jesse's indomitable spirit remained undaunted, and they maintained a positive outlook on life. Several social media users shared their thoughts on the incident. One Reddit user wrote, "That's nice, but when shit hits the fan and you're heading to war, you'll be in AMCUs and boots like the rest of the boys." Another Redditor commented, "In my opinion, if you want to express your gender, do it at home. No one is in the uniform to express their gender. I am all for people doing what they want, but making a song and dance about it and forcing it on everyone comes across as, look at me, look at me." I feel sorry for this man's wife and children. I've suffered the reputational blow of such decisions, and it's not easy to recover from. Taking this path is sacrificial, and I can't begin to imagine how this affects his family. And saying it feels like being struck by a truck? I understand the use of hyperbole here. Even still, get the fuck out of here. Ask any pedestrian fortunate enough to survive such an event if it felt anything like discovering gender diversity. I'm certain they'll concur. Saying, "Oh, hey, guy who got ran over by a truck. Did it feel like when you became a woman?" "Oh, no, that's exactly what it felt like when I felt like I got hit by a truck, and that's when I knew I wasn't a man, I was a woman." Yeah, said no one ever. And didn't you discover this when you're 35? How old are you now? What do you mean you kept it, you intended to only share with a select few? Like, how many people, like, what's the timeline on this? It doesn't add up. Like, you figured out at 35, which I'm assuming is your current age, but then now, like, when you initially kept the identity concealed, it sounds like a bit of an inconsistency to me. I'm not you, and I don't give an actual damn, but just sounds like an inconsistency to me. But whatever. The language they used is courageous step. I suppose it does take some courage to willfully destroy your credibility as an army captain and as a man to paint your nails in the name of gender identity. Like, why the hell would you ever want to do that in the military? Like, you would think the military is designed to screen these type of people out, but somehow they made it through the cracks, and now anywhere they go, everybody must acquiesce and capitulate to whatever arbitrary whim these guys can conjure up at a moment's notice. How is this not a distraction? During my phase, I can vividly recall that someone saying threats from a man with painted toenails just didn't hit the same. Does he think he's immune from this judgment? In hindsight, I believe he was correct, and I knew he was back then. Times were different. This policy dictated that, oh no, excuse me. Thankfully, Jesse's bravery bore fruit as their immediate supervisor granted him interim for the female uniform. This is a terrible move. This suggests that the whole damn militia is woke, and this opens up the floodgate for more of this to ensue going on. And then that floodgate fear is confirmed. Now you got a military full of men looking like women and vice versa, as quick as they can apply, and you've transformed your military into a circus. And what does any of this have to do with your duty in the military? This is shit you do in your free time. Just like the guy said, do it at home. Like when you're on leave or whatever, get what happened to going out in the middle of nowhere and doing this kind of stuff? Like, why do you need to be seen for your well-being to remain intact? I think that is highly grandiose and exaggerated. Like, this is textbook mental illness. How is it not? Why do you think this happened? How come his wife just couldn't see past the gender identity and see the man that she decided to commit her life to and bear children for? Simple answer to that question. That man is gone, and he willingly destroyed his family for a chance to grow his hair and paint his nails in the goddamn military. Because no matter what gender you are in your fantasy, reality carves out no exceptions for this nonsense. It's like being in an echo chamber of sanity when they say when you said do it at home. Like, I had that same sentiment. This is not difficult to digest. It's not hard to piece this together if you just kind of sit down, breathe, and think it through using actual logic and reasoning. In summary, it's another disappointing tale of a man consumed by gender ideology destroying his family, punishing a wife and her children for the narcissistic desire of a confused man to pursue a false happiness in a deeply flawed ideology at the expense of a life that they were supposed to build together. The article insists that he bounced back from this shortfall without missing a beat, but I highly doubt that's the case. Any man with any sense does not willingly throw away his future for the instant gratification associated with pretending you're a woman for the world to see and not be derailed by it. Stories like these hit me kind of hard because I was going down this path. I'd be lying if I said I'm not triggered on an everyday basis to return to this lifestyle. But I know what that future holds, and I've squandered enough time in my 31 years making devastating and foolish decisions time and time again. At some point, one must realize that as time progresses, we must not combat nature's way of making us outgrow things when we outgrow them. If I ever decide to fall back into those desires that continue to tempt me to this day, nobody will ever know. And if one cannot resist a desire to engage in such sexual proclivities, in my opinion, that's the way to go about it. Nobody ever know. Some things are simply more important. If you haven't studied language arts since high school because you had a perfectly fine and working understanding of the English language, you probably are unfamiliar with neopronouns. Neopronouns are this new wave of made up gibberish that the queer and trans communities use to address one another. And they want you to do it too. Words like z, zer, zim, thee, them, theirs, paint self. No need to continue babbling like somebody being electrocuted while eating saltwater taffy. Apparently, according to one of the numerous self-proclaimed authorities on this nonsense, anything can be a pronoun. Verbs can be pronouns, so can adjectives, prepositions, and nouns. All things can be pronouns. Each gender has its own pronouns, I think, and with an ever-increasing number of genders being synthesized on a daily basis, we now have more pronouns than ever before. Isn't that blissfully confusing? Now, one might find themselves wondering how in the hell they're supposed to keep up with all of these new genders and pronouns. I'll gladly tell you, you're not supposed to. It's a wild goose chase trying to stay in step with the convoy of confusion, modifiers of language and meaning, and alphabet soups. You will surely suffer an aneurysm committing any effort to staying in stride with constantly moving targets that are directly linked to these people's self-esteem, sense of worth, and visibility. That's where CNN swoops in to save the day for all of us simple folk who are too white and simple-minded to embrace such complex and puzzling concepts. According to an article I found from Everyday Chirp, CNN has released a guide to neopronouns for the modern-day dummy who has better things to do than sit around and sound like he's scatting trying to properly address these people. I get giddy at the prospect of dismantling this foolishness, but I'll try to contain myself. I've been looking into and hearing all of the arguments that the left and the gender ideologues have to offer, and I've become quick witted and adept at slicing through the tactics they use to assume the frame of a true authority on these topics. They stress an air of kindness and concern, as we are responsible for their feelings by what we say. They try to work in some kind of historical existence to insist that things have always been this way, and it isn't some fairly new phenomenon that has risen to fame within the past 10 to 15 years. To this, I pose one question before I read the article. If this ideology has so much historical roots and heritage, why is there a need to reteach this to everyone? Why have things gotten markedly worse since it blew up? Everyone who's been around a while knows how things have been, and if it was so commonplace, why would you be getting misgendered all the time? The answer to that question is because it isn't true. These are downtrodden individuals, actively living in a self imposed alternate reality rife with melancholia and depression. They know the truth, but they don't value it any. They will say whatever they need to and go to whatever length to indoctrinate as many people into the cult of misery, which is their lives. And they exemplify this in just about every TikTok that comes from this community of confused people. CNN recently covered the subject of neopronouns, gender neutral descriptors like leaf, sun, and star. The piece, A Guide to Neopronouns from A to Z, and that's AE to ZE, discussed eliminating gender markers. An expert encouraged treating neopronouns with the same respect as traditional pronouns. The network noted that many English words, especially pronouns, have gender markers. However, not all pronouns are strictly binary. For instance, some non binary and trans individuals prefer the singular, they. Neopronouns, which differ from the common she, he, and they, include terms like Z and M. Some of these were created centuries ago by writers aiming to mention subjects without gender assumptions. Nowadays, these are mainly used by non binary and transgender people. For those unfamiliar, neopronouns offer greater freedom of identity, mainly used by non binary, transgender, and gender non conforming individuals. Examples from the Human Rights Campaign include Z-Zer. I asked Zer to come to the movies. Z said yes. And Z-Zer. The teacher graded Zer paper, and Z got an A. Nonsense. It's just absolute ridiculousness. Dennis Barron, an emeritus professor at the University of Illinois, shared that some prefer noun self neopronouns, which are entirely unique to them. Examples given were star or star self instead of binary options like she or herself. For someone using Leaf, a sentence might read, Leaf arrived early. I was late to meet Leaf. Noun self neopronouns gained traction on Tumblr when linguist Jason D'Angelo indicated that noun self neopronouns gained traction on Tumblr around 2012 and 2013. They're popular within fandom communities who often choose pronouns from their favorite series or themes. Regarding criticisms, some feel neopronouns are frivolous and might undermine transgender and non binary individuals' acceptance. Barron countered by emphasizing every word, even in English, was, quote, invented at one point. However, the CNN article was met with notable mockery online. Critics labeled it as a sign of America's mental crisis. Representative Matt Gaetz criticized the network's direction, while Jonathan Kay suggested that the content was juvenile. Aaron Siberium and Wilfred Riley expressed astonishment over the mainstream acceptance of such concepts. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton commented saying, CNN goes to war against biology, children, and reality on behalf of transgender extremists. Ex-Air Force officer Dan Bowen opened the article, highlighted a broader mental crisis in America. This is where CNN is today, a reflection of the mental crisis we have in America today. In summation, while neopronouns are a way of embracing diverse identities, they also prove divisive in public discourse. CNN's attempt to clarify their usage and importance was met with both support and criticism, reflecting ongoing societal debates. Now, I'm supposed to call someone a leaf because they want me to. Weird, but okay. But if I don't, for whatever reason, will you lash out at me and label me a bigot or a something phobe? If the answer is yes, which it is, then fuck off. Lash out. I don't care. My speech will always be voluntary and not subject to the arbitrary whim of a person who does not understand themselves. And he says, treat them with the same respect as traditional like, what's same respect? Respect is earned. You might be able to bully me into cooperation, but you'll never bully me into respecting you or any of this nonsense. Seriously. And all pronouns are binary. All pronouns reference either a he, she, or a combination of both. Anything else is not congruent with the human species. This is not a subjective declaration. It is fact. And I really don't care what they prefer. I prefer to stick to male and female binary pronouns, but you don't want that. Some's got to give. And which people are using these people from an historical context that wanted to address subjects without gender assumptions? Which people? Where? And by whom? What writers? Nobody in history acknowledged gender discrepancies because it was a self-evident reality. That statement is bullshit. And you notice the vagueness in the language here when it comes to something that empirical historical data could clearly settle? Show me your damn data. I don't want to hear from no damn gender study majors either. Show me some real actual data that's verified that the majority of rational minded individuals can, agree upon. Not something you just pulled out of a hat when you rolled out of bed this morning. There is no freedom from your biological identity, no matter how hard you try. It's impossible. You are who and what you are. And all this weird z zim zer zah but zoom zah all this eep op ork all of that. It was mainly used by the transgender and non-binary and gender neutral conforming people because they invented it all. What do other people use, and why do they use that? Why do people who don't subscribe to this use a different set of words? Why wouldn't they just obviously flock to this new and improved language? Y'all made it up. Those sentences are ridiculous. Why does your existence bind me to speak words of your choosing? Who are you? This is utterly insane and juvenile. For real. So people can call dibs on pronouns? So what happened if two people dib the same pronoun? Can you file suit? Is it first come, first serve? How does that work? Really would like to know how that works. Because on paper, it sounds stupid. And I think in real life, it's stupid also. Noun self neopronouns allow one to escape the binary options like she or herself, perhaps verbally, yeah. But actually, however, it doesn't work that way. And in any case, I reject the premise of this cockamamie alteration to the language and culture on the basis that if my participation is necessary for your fulfillment, you will never receive it and you will not be fulfilled. This translate is popular amongst losers. At least when he said these noun self neopronouns gain some traction on Tumblr. And they're popular within fandom communities who often choose their pronouns from their favorite series or themes. Yeah, that these people they sound like losers to me. The people who like a cartoon so much that they try to change their gender to something like this, and then tell us all to play along with it, or they're gonna lose their minds, or they're gonna spaz out. This type of stuff people did when I was in the boys' home. It's like after a while, people just don't give a fuck. Spaz out. Who cares? Nobody wants to be held hostage by your goddamn delusions all the time. Like that's a very tiring game. You know, and you don't have to play it to know that it's tiring. And if every word in English was invented at one point, like, well, duh, that's obvious. And if so, why do so many people miss the word invention convention where the neopronouns dropped? How come this is, where was that in the 60s, 70s, 80s? Where was it then? Did y'all not post any flyers? Did y'all have a lousy ad budget? Explain that to me. And what is it? Every word in English was invented. What does that mean exactly? Invented at one point. Every word in English was invented at one point. Like, I wish I could get some clarity on that sentence, because it's just like, what's the significance in uttering this sentence regarding this discussion? Like, and in regards to Matt Gaetz saying this juvenile, I'm glad somebody agrees with me. It's definitely a display of a severe mental crisis that must be spread airborne, must be in the air, because it seems like a lot of people are getting it. This shit is overtly void of any sound reasoning. And if you cared about any of these aforementioned things, children, biology, reality, you'd never be condoning any of this woke bullshit. It's the only move to make. Language is divisive because it's novel and it has no logical leg to stand on. None of this Z, Zer, Zim shit, this they self, paint self, leaf and star and sun self. It makes no sense. It's a flawed ideology. And those who commit to it will likely not find the pot of gold they seek. So with all this being said, what's the takeaway from all of this? It's certain that CNN is a laughingstock in the realm of news. And they've gone totally woke. Neopronouns are stupid. And noun self neopronouns, whatever it is, are just branches on this tree of stupidity. The average American, hell, the average person is not on board with all of this shit. And if they are, it's only so far you can push before you face pushback. CNN doesn't give a damn about Americans, the culture, objective journalism, children, or what the people actually value. It's a hard sell after publishing an article this dumb and attempting to defend it against well-deserved criticism. We've not only gone off the rails of the crazy train, we've completely derailed, and a collision with something flammable, lethal, and long-lasting is, unfortunately, imminent. People must dig in their heels and risk whatever loss is at stake to protect the remaining values and integrity that got this country to what it is today, flaws and all. Otherwise, very soon, sooner than you may think, you will look up, and everything you cherish and love will be unrecognizable. I mean, look at where we are now. Did you see this coming, for real? Hey everybody, that's the show. Thanks for listening. I've been trying to figure out ways to make this sound a lot better. I want to know if you guys noticed something different about this episode in terms of how it flowed, anything, any feedback would be good, whenever you hear this episode. But that's it for today. Thank everybody for listening. I really, really appreciate it. Be looking out for Mental Maintenance Part 4 of 9 coming out this weekend. This is getting better and better. I'm finding my rhythm with that. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Until then, I'll